He looked at Elena. Then it reached the bullet needed just under 3 seconds to cross the
Target is in
valley.
sight.
And in that time, Captain Elena Serrano had to trust figures smaller than dust. Wind left to right. Catching then 6. Try it now. Then 8. Perfect. Thanks. Air temperature falling with the sun gone behind range. Density altitude high enough to steal velocity. Range is 1,600. Fire my mark. Target exposure, maybe for Sir. All personnel present and accounted for 18 in between a hostage's shoulder and a steel upright confirmed chamber of a log 22 Malawian Quatches. Her cheek rested against a stock cold as river stone. Below her engines idled in a crescent of yellow light, and men with rifles moved like black cutouts in diesel haze. Beside her, Chief Quinn whispered the final correction, calm and flat. Hold point 3 low. Spin drift accounted. Send when ready. On the command net. Colonel Adrian Mercer gave a short, humorless laugh. At that distance, impossible. Elena inhaled once, let half of it go, and broke the trigger like glass. The recoil was a compact shove into bone and muscle. The suppressor turned thunder into a hard metallic cough. Through the optic, she saw nothing for a heartbeat except mirage and the shiver of heat above the valley floor. Then the truck's passenger side mirror burst outward. A head snapped back. The hostage dropped clear. The man who had been using him as cover folded against the door and slid into the dust. Silence filled the net. Then Mercer again, voice stripped bare of certainty. Who authorized that shot? No one answered him at first. Men in the kill zone were still processing what had happened. Quinn's gloved hand tightened once on her shoulder. The closest thing he ever offered to celebration. Far below, chaos detonated. Security fighters ran in circles, firing at empty rock. Somewhere in that confusion was the reason they had come to this mountain. And somewhere behind that reason was the question that had followed Elena Serrano for 2 years. How had a sniper nobody in that task force wanted to become the one shooter nobody else could replace? 3 nights earlier, the air at Red Basin tasted like alkali dust, overheated wiring, and coffee that had died an ugly death on a warmer plate. The range complex sprawled across the desert in long geometric scars of concrete, steel, and impact BMS. Every line cut for precision. Every surface designed to punish carelessness. Light bled out of the western sky in a copper band, throwing the sniper school buildings into sharp black relief. Wind drove grit across the motor pool in thin, restless sheets. Elena stepped out of the transport van with a hard case in each hand and felt the desert heat lifting off the pavement even after sunset. Around her, the usual inventory of judgment took place in glances. Rank tabs, unit patches, the pace of her walk, the shape of her rifle case. The fact that she was a woman arriving alone to a temporary joint task force full of men who had spent careers being told that experience and instinct were the only currencies that mattered. None of that changed her stride. 2 Navy petty officers were unloading cases nearby. One stopped working long enough to look at the stencil on hers. Sniper detachment, he said to the other, not quietly. Thought Mercer had already picked his shooter. The other looked over. Maybe she's Admin Elena, kept moving. The operations building exhaled refrigerated air and fluorescent hum. The second she pushed through the door. Inside, the walls were layered with maps, satellite photos, range cards, and dry erase boards filled with dates, initials, and ammunition lots. Boots struck polished concrete. Printers clicked. Somewhere deeper in the building, a television murmured through a news channel with the sound off. The place had the strange focus of a unit waiting for a mission packet that had not officially landed yet, but had already started reshaping the room. Master Sergeant Jonah Creed stood at the end of the corridor with his sleeves rolled up and a data tablet under one arm. He was lean in the way old working dogs are lean with gray at the temples and eyes that missed almost nothing. He had spent years training snipers for units that never appeared on recruiting posters, and he wore the reputation lightly enough that it frightened people more than open arrogance would have. He rifled cases then at the dust on our boots. You drove straight from the airport? Yes, Sergeant Major. Good means you didn't waste time trying to impress anyone. Wasn't aware that was part of the checklist. A corner of his mouth moved. Depends you asked. He turned and started walking. She matched his pace. You've read the preliminary packet. Yes. Then you know Colonel Mercer doesn't want you here. I assumed that when he asked for a replacement before I even landed. That bothered you? No. Creed glanced at her once, measuring the answer rather than the tone. Good. Because if a commanding officer's opinion can shake you, the desert will dismantle you before sunrise. He pushed through the briefing room door. The room held 12 people, and the kind of silence that can only be made by people pretending not to study a newcomer. On the main screen, a grainy satellite image showed a mountain valley with a road twisting beside a river and a cluster of buildings pinned to a slope like loose teeth. Seated near the center table was Colonel Adrian Mercer. Mercer was a tall man in his early 50s, broad-shouldered with silver starting at the sides of his close-cropped hair and the heavy stillness of someone used to being obeyed quickly. He had begun his career in naval special warfare before shifting into Joint Strategic Command years earlier, an unusual path that had made him useful, famous, and more than a little mythologized in the community. Younger operators called him the SEAL Colonel with a mix of admiration and irritation. He did not correct them. He also did not forgive failure. His eyes moved to Elena, as if she were another logistical complication. Captain Serrano, he said. Did personnel lose my message? No, sir. Then you know I requested Chief Beckett for this billet. Yes, sir. And yet here you are? Yes, sir. Some men can turn one syllable into surrender. Elena's voice denied him that pleasure. Mercer leaned back. Then let me be direct. The shot profile for this operation exceeds standard qualification. We will be shooting through heat, wind shear, and shifting elevation across a live population center. One miss compromises the entire mission. I asked for a shooter with combat-proven extreme range in irregular terrain. Creed spoke before Elena could. You got one. Mercer did not look away from her. Combat-proven. Elena set one rifle case on the table, released the latches, and opened it. The rifle inside lay in fitted foam. Suppressor removed, bolts separate, optic capped. She lifted it carefully, checking chamber by reflex, even though it had been hard-packed for transport. The room washed her hands. Professionals always wash hands first. 3 deployments, she said. Mountain interdiction, urban counter-observation, and route overwatch. Confirmed long shot at 1,412 meters under crosswind. 2 emergency neutralizations inside 600 while relocating under fire. 0 blue incidents, 0 civilian strikes. Mercer folded his arms and the miss in Nineveh. The room chilled by degree. Elena placed the rifle on the table. Recorded as a non-firing abort due to collateral risk. That's one way to phrase it. Creed's jaw tightened. Mercer. But Mercer kept going. Another way would be to say you let a target walk because your spotter died and you hesitated. There are sentences that land like blows because they strike places already fractured. Elena felt the old crack open under her sternum, felt dust and heat and blood from another country rise out of memory so fast it almost changed the color of the room. She answered anyway. I withheld because the shot line was compromised by 2 non-combatants entering the lane at the last second and the target escaped. Yes, sir. Mercer gave a small nod as if the point had been neatly established. That is exactly why you're not my first choice. Before Elena could respond, someone at the far end of the table shifted hard enough to scrape a chair leg. Chief Petty Officer Micah Quinn looked younger than his service record suggested, all weathered edges and compressed energy with the flattened nose of a boxer and the steady hands of a surgeon. He had been assigned as the mission's lead spotter and was widely considered the best wind reader in the task force. A man who could watch Mirage Band over rock and tell you what a bullet would do half a valley away. Sir, Quinn said with respect, Beckett's not here. Mercer turned to him. Are you volunteering to lower our standards, Chief? No, sir. I'm saying the range doesn't care who you want it. It cares who can solve it. For the first time, Mercer's gaze shifted from Elena to Quinn. And in that exchange, Elena saw history. Professional respect, old conflict, the Thai trope. Everybody in elite units walks when 2 high performers disagree, and neither one can afford to be publicly wrong. Mercer finally stood. Sunrise eval. He said 1 shot cold or full value end. If Captain Serrano beats the standard, she stays in the stack. If she doesn't, she goes back on the next transport. Clear. No one answered because no one needed to. Mercer looked at Elena one last time. Get some sleep, Captain. Tomorrow, the desert votes. She spent the night in a plywood room that smelled of detergent, CLP, and drywall dust. Her bunk was hard. The air conditioner rattled with a mechanical insistence of something ready to fail. Through the thin wall came muffled laughter from another room, boots hitting concrete, someone watching a fight clip on low volume. She cleaned the rifle under a single yellow lamp, moving by touch as much as sight. Bolt lugs, chamber face, thread pitch on the suppressor, torque on the rings, data card laminated and fixed to the stock, spare mags staged in order, kestrel calibrated, laser rangefinder battery checked. Her body knew the sequence the way a pianist knows scales. The weapon system was a 22 Malawian Quachas, configured 4.338 Norma Magnum, 27 inches barrel folding chassis, suppressor Loctite optic, with first focal plane reticle and enough elevation travel to argue with physics. Not magic, never magic, just steel glass powder copper and math. The lies started when people called great shots impossible. Most of them were simply expensive in training, punishing in discipline, and unforgiving in consequence. She set the suppressor down and stared at the scar on the inside of her left wrist. A pale line half hidden under her watch strap. Not from combat training accident years ago. A rapple line snagged on rusted steel during a breach rehearsal. A small wound, but permanent. She liked it for that reason. Permanent marks were honest. A knock sounded against the open door frame. Quinn leaned there holding 2 paper cups of coffee. One of these might still qualify as legal. Which one? The one that smells less like engine cleaner. He stepped in, handed her a cup, and let the silence sit a moment before speaking again. That more than anything was why people trusted him. He didn't rush into another person's head as if entitled to space. You want to talk about Mercer? No. You want to talk about Nineveh? No. He nodded. Good. Those were both bad openings. She took a sip. The coffee was vicious. Why'd you speak up in there? He shrugged. Because he was testing the wrong variable. Maybe he was testing both. That too. He pulled a folded notebook from his pocket and set it beside her rifle. Inside were hand-drawn sketches of the range complex. Wind corridors marked in pencil. Notes on thermals off the eastern berm. Expected first light shift. Mirage behavior over gravel versus steel plates. You've never shot this lane, he said. I have. The left pocket gets weird as the sun comes up. Looks like a 7-mile wind at the muzzle and a for target. But it's the middle that lies to you. Bullet floats half a tenth, right? If you trust the grass. Don't trust the grass. She looked up. You made this for Beckett. I made it for whoever had the shot. That answer carried no performance in it, just truth. She closed the notebook and handed it back. Keep it. I'd rather read the range myself. That earned a short laugh. Creed was right about you. What did he say? That you listen to advice best when you haven't asked for it. Sounds like an insult. It was meant as insurance. He started for the door, then paused. Mercer is not the enemy. No, Elena said he just enjoys acting like one. Quinn gave her a look that suggested the distinction might matter later. Get some sleep, Captain. When he left, she stripped the bolt again and dry-fired into darkness, feeling the break, following the reticle through the imagined recoil cycle. Outside, the desert wind moved over Red Basin in long, low breaths. Before dawn, the world was silver and black and so sharp it looked fabricated. Floodlights washed the range complex in white glare. Vehicles idled along the access road. Diesel exhaust hanging close to the ground in the cold. The desert had dropped 30 degrees since midnight, and every metal surface bit skin on contact. The eval lane ran from a concrete firing point into broken scrub and distant steel. Targets were set at staggered, unknown distances, but everyone understood the real test was the far plate. A 12-inch circle half hidden by terrain, painted fresh white against a tan hillside. Enough range that wind became a living thing rather than a number. Mercer stood with a tablet in one hand and a headset around his neck. Creed was beside him, expression unreadable. Operators ringed the firing line in jackets and gloves, trying to look casual and failing. Chief Beckett shot first. Ryan Beckett had the polished confidence of a man whose resume had carried him through rooms for years. Strong build, expensive optic, spotless kit. He went prone with theatrical calm, settled behind his rifle, and took his time. Too much time, Elena thought. The morning thermal had already begun to wake. When Beckett fired, the shot echoed clean across the range. The far plate did not move. A range camera flashed the dirt splash 6 and left. Beckett cursed softly, rolled off the gun, and gave Wynn the kind of stare men give to problems that refuse to respect them. Mercer's face did not change. Another shooter from Marines hit at a shorter distance, but missed the far plate. Then a Ranger sniper cleanly rang steel at mid-range and pushed a long shot high. One by one, proven names met the same math and lost. Elena watched the light more than the shooters. It was coming fast now. Thin gold leaking along the eastern ridge line, changing the entire texture of the air. Mirage began as a shimmer, then built into waves over the gravel. Somewhere out there, invisible except in effect, lay the answer Mercer cared about. Not marksmanship in a vacuum. Adaptation under a range that punished certainty. When Creed finally called her name, the room in Elena's chest went quiet in the way it always did right before work. She moved to the line. No waist motion. Packed down, mat out, rifle assembled, suppressor on, mag seated, bolt closed, data card clipped. She went prone and felt the earth take her weight. Elbows settling in a grit, cheek finding stock, shoulder pocketing recoil before it existed. Her breathing slowed to the narrow band between calm and readiness. The optic came alive. White plate, tan hillside, black edge of a rock. At 10 o'clock, Mirage lifting in the middle lane. Range, Quinn said from behind the spotting scope. Confirmed unknown, Mercer answered. Elena keyed the laser only once and got a clean return. 1,511 M. She did not repeat it out loud. Shooter ready, she said. The desert answered with a crosswind she could feel on the back of her neck, but not at the target. Different temperatures along the path. Layered currents, the sort of shot people pretended was luck when they didn't understand it. She dialed elevation, held wind, and then did the one thing Mercer expected least. She came off the gun. A murmur rippled through the line. Creed said nothing. Elena scooped a pinch of dust, let fall. Watch how it drifted near the muzzle brake shadow. Then she looked through the optic again and tracked the Mirage in thirds, reading the invisible river between her and the plate. Quinn's voice came low behind her. Middle lane is pushing harder than left. I know. She adjusted one click and breathed out. When a shot broke, it sounded smaller than Beckett had, better suppressed, better seated. The plate stayed still for a fraction of a second, long enough to make the whole line lean forward. Then it snapped backward on its mount with a bright metallic crack that came back a moment later from the hillside. Nobody spoke. Mercer took 2 steps toward the camera monitor as if his body needed separate confirmation from his ears. The playback showed impact just inside the right half of the circle. Creed folded his arms. Quinn, still behind the scope, said quietly, "Cold bore hit." Now the murmurs came harder. Not loud. Professionals rarely gave you loud, but the energy changed shape. She could feel it like a pressure front moving across the line. Mercer looked at her for a long beat again. Eval was 1 shot. Sir, I'm revising the eval. Creed stepped in before the moment could sour. No, you established the standard last night. She met it. Mercer and Creed held each other's gaze. Old authority grinding against old certainty. Finally, Mercer gave a single nod. Fine, he said. Captain Serrano stays. He turned away, but not before Elena saw something in his expression that had not been there the night before. Not belief, not yet, but the first fracture in disbelief. After the line cleared, Creed found her near the equipment shed, where the morning sun was turning the metal walls hot enough to radiate through fabric. He handed her a sealed mission folder with no markings on the outside. Congratulations, he said. Now the easy part is over. Inside were fresh satellite prints, drone stills, and a target profile. Farnazem, age 46, mechanical engineer by training, insurgent logistics specialist by occupation, ghost by habit. He had spent the last 6 months building a network across the Karzai corridor, a mountain route used by smugglers, militias, and anyone else who preferred governments to stay far away. Intelligence believed he had acquired precursor chemicals and detonator architecture for a planned strike against an allied embassy compound. No full-team assault was possible without blowing a larger intelligence operation. No drone strike was clean enough. The valley was too crowded, the target too careful. They needed eyes on him, confirmation of transfer, and if the window opened, a surgical shot from terrain so punishing that Mercer had pushed for his most trusted extreme-range shooter. Elena turned a page and saw the problem. The target compound sat inside a village bold by steep ridges with a river to the south, terraced stone walls to the east, and a road cut into the western slope. Every obvious Overwatch position was either too visible or too far for stable observation. One position marked in red grease pencil offered a clean line into the village loading yard. Range estimates from that ridge, between 1,500 and 1,650 m, depending on exact hide position and target movement. Steep, Elena said. Higher than steep, Creed replied. You'll be building a hide on shale and limestone with daytime thermals, nighttime inversion, and no second gun in supporting angle. If it goes bad, the nearest quick reaction force is too far to save you quickly. Then why not run a closer covert observation post inside the village? Because Nazim has become suspicious. 3 local assets disappeared in 2 months. He's screening everyone. You get one clean look from above, or you don't get them at all. She kept reading signals, intercepts, movement pattern analysis, heat maps, likely transfer window within 48 hours of infiltration. The mission was already humming, even though nobody had said launch. Why the rush? She asked. Creed was quiet for a moment. Because we think he's moving more than parts. He slid one more photo out from behind the stack. It showed a blue cargo truck canvas covered parked beside a cinder block warehouse. On the tailgate, half obscured by shadow, was the symbol for agricultural treatment equipment. Too neat, too harmless. Exactly the kind of disguise smart bomb makers used when moving volatile material through places where nobody asked questions. Embassy strike, Elena asked. That's the public explanation. Off the record, if he moves that load across the corridor intact, we may lose track of it completely. Different countries, different authorities, different rules. After that, a lot of innocent people start depending on luck. Elena closed the folder. When do we leave? Creed looked toward the range where men were already resetting steel for the next evolution. If weather holds, tomorrow night. That afternoon, Red Basin transformed. No more posturing. No more hallway speculation. A mission had crossed from theory to machinery, and trained people move the way trained people do when uncertainty becomes task. Cases opened, ammunition lots were matched and logged, batteries were swapped, encryption, fills loaded, medkits, inventory down to the last compressed gauze packet. The briefing room white bars changed from scheduling grids to route diagrams and contingency trees. Elena worked at a side bench under a fluorescent light that flickered every 30 seconds. She confirmed muzzle velocity with a lot she'd been issued map, predicted drop tables against expected environmental shifts, and built 3 separate data cards. Dawn, midday, and evening. No one shot the same at all 3. Not in that terrain. Not with that much air between muzzle and target. Quinn dropped in a chair across from her, with 2 range printouts and a protein bar. He did not look eager to eat. You just got famous, he said. I hit 1 plate in front of the right audience. Same thing. He spread the printouts. Recon drone got better terrain resolution on the North Ridge. See this saddle? He tapped the contour cluster. Looks like the best hide site from imagery, but the crest line behind it will backlight you after sunrise. Not good if anyone down there is glassing. Elena studied it. Secondary notchier. Less angle on the yard, but deeper shadow and narrower escape route. That's because it's a real hide. Quinn looked pleased. Exactly. They're planning rhythm, locked in quickly. He thought in terrain and time. She thought in geometry and outcome. Between them, the mission became less like a file and more like a machine they might actually control. At the far end of the room, Mercer was speaking with Beckett in low, clipped tones. Beckett's miss on the range had not removed him from the operation entirely. He would be running with the security element on a lower ridge, responsible for counter-ambush and emergency support if the high blew. The arrangement made tactical sense. It also meant Elena would have him close enough to matter. Quinn followed her gaze. You think he's angry? I think men who expected something rarely become saints when denied it. Fair. He lowered his voice. Mercer trusts Beckett because Beckett always takes the shot, and that's supposed to reassure me. No, it's supposed to tell you what Mercer values. Elena marked a mill hold on her card. And what do you value? Coming home with the right people, still breathing. That answer stayed with her. After nightfall, the team moved to the indoor simulator bay for communication drills and target discrimination. The room was dark except for the projection wall where a digitized village flickered between daylight and infrared overlays, voices on the net, mock traffic, civilians, armed men, shadows passing windows, doors opening and closing. The software could never capture the smell of livestock or diesel or human fear, but could teach impatience, and impatience killed people faster than poor marksmanship ever did. Mercer ran the lane. Confirm P before trigger authorization, he said over the headset. The simulated yard filled with movement. A man in a black vest crossed behind pickup. A second man emerged carrying a radio. A woman in a blue headscarf stepped into the lane with a child. Nazim's photo sat taped beneath the screen, but real men never looked like their best photos when they feared death. Elena tracked through the optic without speaking. The simulator projected environmental noise into her earpiece. Goats' engine rattle, distant shouting, rotor wash from a non-existent helicopter meant only to stress concentration. Shot not authorized, Mercer said. Not taking it, Elena replied. The man in the black vest disappeared behind corrugated metal. A new figure entered the yard. Same build, same beard density, wrong gait. Possible target, Beckett said from the observer bank. Elena kept tracking. Negative. Hip asymmetry inconsistent. Mercer heard that and turned slightly. Explain. Photo shows healed right leg injury. Slight external rotation on step. This one's clean. The figure lifted a phone. Another armed man moved to cover him. A civilian crossed between them, carrying a crate. Now Mercer asked, still negative. The actual Nazim appeared 6 seconds later from shadow doorway, using 2 men as movement screens. Elena saw it immediately. Not the face, the behavior. The man everyone protected, but pretended not to. Target identified, she said. No shot. Civilian occlusion. Mercer did not answer once. When he finally did, his tone had changed by half a degree. Correct. After the exercise, while the others stripped off headsets and argued over route options, Mercer stopped beside her station. You read behavior quickly, he said. Yes, sir. Faster than Beckett. She waited. He glanced at the frozen image on the screen. Nazim framed in simulated grain. Being right in a simulator carries no body count. Don't confuse one for the other. I don't, sir. Mercer studied her profile as if searching for vanity and not finding enough of it to dismiss. What happened in Nineveh? It was the second time he had asked, but this time there was no audience, no public point to prove. Elena removed the magazine from the simulator rifle, set it down, and answered without looking at him. We had a rooftop hide over Market District. High-V value facilitator moving through at dawn. My spotter, Staff Sergeant Daniel Vale, picked up glint from an opposing shooter 1 second before I did. He pushed me down as the round came through the hide. He died on sight. I reacquired the target, but 2 children stepped into the lane, pulling a card. I aborted. The target escaped. Mercer said nothing. She continued because the room in her chest had already opened, and there was no reason to close it halfway. The after-action board said my restraint prevented collateral. The same board also noted mission failure. Both were true. Do you regret it? Elena finally looked at him every day. Not because I withheld, because I needed him alive beside me to make the decision faster. Mercer absorbed that, not comfortable with it, not dismissing it either. He saved your life, he said. Yes, sir. And now you shoot better. It was not a question. It was an accusation stripped down until it resembled respect. Elena answered the only way honesty allowed. Now, I shoot slower. Mercer's eyes narrowed. That can be fatal. It can also be the difference between finishing a mission and poisoning it. For a second, she thought he might shut the conversation down on the spot. Instead, he gave a single curt nod and walked away. She watched him cross the bay, shoulders rigid, carrying whatever ghost had made him into a man who trusted decisiveness more than caution. Near midnight, Quinn found her alone at the rear vehicle line, checking straps on a rucksack already packed twice. Moonlight silvered the rows of antennas and windshields. Generators hummed from the maintenance shed. Someone smoked near the perimeter fence, ember bright, then gone. He asked you about Nineveh. Quinn said she did not ask how he knew. Units like this were ecosystems of information. Yes, and he still wants a shooter who never hesitates. Quinn leaned against the truck beside her. Mercer's buried more operators than either of us. Men like that start treating certainty like body armor. Doesn't mean it works. No, he looked out into the dark, but it explains the habit. She cinched down a strap. You trust him with a mission, usually with people. Depends which version of him reports to work. That was as close to insubordination as Quinn ever came. And because he said it so mildly, it landed harder. He reached into his cargo pocket and tossed her a small cloth bundle. Inside was a wind meter vane, improvised and lightweight, barely larger than 2 fingers. Painted matte feel for the hide, he said. Thread on comm wire. Better read than dust if the thermal stacks. You made this? My daughter did the paint. Elena looked at him. You have a daughter? He gave her a dry look. I contain multitudes, Captain. The image startled her more than it should have. Quinn, in civilian clothes, at a kitchen table. A child painting careful matte lines on a piece of kit meant for war. It reminded her that nobody in the unit was only what they looked like under fluorescent light. Thank her for me, Elena said. Survive first, then I'll consider it. They flew the next night in blackout conditions over mountain country that looked from the ramp like torn paper layered under moonlight. The helicopter smelled of hydraulic fluid, canvas, and men try not to think too far ahead. Rotor vibration climbed through the deck into knees, spine, teeth. Red lights washed every face into the same hard mask. Elena sat opposite Quinn, headset on, rifle between her knees braced against rucks and medical kits. Around them, the assault detachment check gear by touch. Beckett sat near the ramp, one gloved hand on the frame, eyes closed as if conserving something. Mercer stood hunched near the cockpit bulkhead, revealing a tablet lit faint green. He looked older in the rotor chop, the hard planes of his face emphasized by shadow. Their insertion zone was not a proper landing zone, so much as a compromise scratched onto her Jeline map. The pilot brought the aircraft low through a saddle where wind slammed the fuselage from 2 directions at once. The whole machine, yacht corrected, dropped. Dust and pale rock exploded in the wash. Go, go, go. They debarked into cold mountain air, sharp enough to cut the lungs. The slope underfoot was loose shale. Every step threatened noise. Above them, the sky was brutally clear. Stars pinned, so close they seemed to ring. When the rotor wash faded and the helicopter clawed back into darkness. Now the mountain took over. They moved in file along a goat track that barely deserved the name. Climbing by hand as much as by boot, packs dragged shoulders, weapons knocked quietly against load-bearing straps. The night carried smells different from the desert. Stone chilled deep through sparse juniper. Animal dung drying in terraces below, and far away the sweet burnt stink of low-grade diesel. The village appeared after an hour as a scatter of dim amber points tucked inside the valley. No grid power, generator light, cooking fires. Human geometry drawn small against the black bulk of the hills. Quinn touched Elena's elbow and pointed upslope. Their hindsight lay another 300 vertical feet above the last switchback in a fracture of limestone barely wider than a compact car. Reaching it required crossing a section of open scree where any misstep might send a waterfall of rock into the dark. Beckett moved past them toward the lower security position with 2 operators and machine gun team. As he passed, he glanced at Elena. "Try not to make history on my net," he said. "Then keep your net clean," she replied. He smiled without warmth and kept going. By the time Elena and Quinn crawled into the hide, sweat had gone cold under all their layers. The position was worse than imagery had suggested, and better in one crucial way. Worse because the shooting shelf tilted slightly downhill, forcing constant muscle correction. Better because a wind-cut notch above them created broken silhouette lines that would make spotting them from below nearly impossible unless someone knew exactly where to look. They worked under a camouflage sheet and dimmed red lamps. No unnecessary sound. Quinn cut and wedged local brush. Elena laid the rifle on a pack cradle and built a rear support from compressed fabric and dirt. They reinforced elbow pockets with spare sand socks. The little vein Quinn's daughter had painted went out on thread-thin line, just above the rock lip, where could read the microcurrent without catching moonlight. Range cards grew under a pencil. Distances to the warehouse door, cargo yard, truck lane, Moss Corner, River Bridge, rooftop with satellite dish, second-floor window with broken shutter. She mapped every angle where a human chest might exist for less than 2 seconds. Below them, life continued in pieces. A dog barked and was silenced. A truck shifted gears. Someone shouted from a terrace and was answered. The river moved through the valley with a low, constant rush. Its sound rising and falling as the night wind turned. Quinn lay behind a spotting scope and adjusted focus 1 millimeter at a time. Warehouse door 1578. Elena wrote it. Blue truck tailgate 1612. She wrote that too. Mine ladder 1499. She paused. That may be our shortest clean angle. Also brightest background after sunrise. I know. Hours passed in the way surveillance hours always pass. Simultaneously slow and expensive. Your knees numbed. Your lower back tightened. Your neck learned new forms of pain. The face behind the glass became less a part of you than a tool that happened to ache. Near dawn, the temperature dropped again before rising. The valley air layered itself into visible currents. Thin smoke from cooking fires drifted sideways, then flattened, then began to lift. In a courtyard below, 2 men rolled fuel drums. A woman swept dirt from stone as if that old human argument with dust had any final answer. Children appeared in doorways and vanished. No sign of Mazem. On the command, Net Mercer's voice came quiet and clipped. All element status. Quinn answered for them. Hide 1 in position. No compromise. Visual on objective cluster. Becca checked in from the lower ridge. Security set. 2 possible trail approaches covered. Then the local asset, call sign lantern, transmitted from somewhere inside the village with the careful cadence of a man speaking under threat. Market active. No movement on principle. Elena watched a rooftop shimmer into sunlight. Her trigger hand rested open on the stock. She did not grip early anymore. Daniel Vale had taught her that years before Nineveh. Never grab the rifle like you're afraid it will leave. Let be where it's supposed to be. An hour after sunrise, the first complication arrived. Not the target, not hostile gunfire. A wedding procession. It started as music, thin and ray floating up the valley before the people appeared. Then a line of villagers emerged from the eastern lane, carrying bolts of bright fabric and trays of food. Children ran ahead. Women in vivid scarves crossed directly through 2 of Elena's planned firing lanes on their way toward a larger compound near the river. Quinn swore under his breath. That wasn't in pattern of life. Mercer came on the net. Lantern explained a delay. Then unscheduled family event. Principal may attend. Unclear. Mercer's irritation sharpened. How does a wedding become unclear? Lantern answered with 1 sentence that explained more than the words themselves. In this valley, Colonel, everything becomes unclear after men with guns arrive. The procession changed the geometry of the whole morning. Civilians multiplied. Pickup trucks blocked certain angles. Musicians settled under an awning 30 m from the warehouse. Would have been a precise interdiction problem became a living knot. Elena adjusted her range card and said nothing. Quinn studied her profile. You thinking the same thing I am? If Nazim uses the crowd as cover, Mercer will want a shot I may not have. And if he moves the truck before the crowd thins, then we have a worse problem. As if summoned by the thought, a black SUV rolled into the yard near the warehouse and parked nose out for departure. Four armed men dismounted. One took rooftop position. Another swept the lane with a radio in hand. Security posture, not celebration. Quinn leaned closer to the scope. Possible package movement. Mercer's voice came instantly. Hide one confirm. Elena tracked the warehouse door. Can't confirm yet. Two men brought out wooden crates stankled as irrigation pump hearts. They loaded them into the blue truck. Careful with the weight. Too careful. Real pump housings took abuse better than these men were allowing. Mercer said rules remain unchanged. Positive ID, no collateral, no truck strike unless transfer confirmed and clear civilians. That last condition was the kind commanders used when they understood their choices were bad and wanted language to make them appear less so. For 21 minutes, the yard boiled with movement and still no target. Then Lantern transmitted a burst, so sudden it flattened every other sound in Elena's mind. Principal on site, west doorway, repeating principal on site. Nazim appeared between two bodyguards, carrying nothing, wearing plain clothes and a scarf draped loose enough to obscure his jawline. He did not look like a mastermind. He looked like a tired engineer late for an argument. Men like him usually did. The dangerous ones had learned not to advertise. Elena found him. Confirmed gait, shoulder line, facial ratio, old leg injury. The reticles settled against him as he paused by the truck. Then the bride emerged, laughing from the adjacent courtyard with 3 children in front of her. Negative shot, Elena said. Mercer answered too quickly. Hold for 2-step lead when he clears. He won't clear, Quinn said. Crowd density increasing. Nazim bent to inspect one of the crates. A child ran behind him. Another man stepped into the lane with a tray of tea. Music rose. The bodyguards changed positions. Elena tracked, came off. Reacquired. Came off again. Have chances. Dirty backstops. Too much life near the line. Mercer's breathing hit the net once. Very faint. Captain, if you have it, take it. Elena watched Nazim's chest cross behind the bride's shoulder, then reappear beside a fuel drum, then disappear again. I do not have it. The silence that followed was colder than the air. At the lower ridge, Beckett came on. I can shift up slope and build a 600M side angle. Quinn snapped back before Mercer could answer. Negative. You move now. You burn half the valley. Mercer ignored the interruption. How long to position? 15, if terrain holds. It was too long. Everyone knew it. Nazim said something to the driver of the blue truck. The man nodded and moved toward the cab. Elena, Quinn said, softly leaving off rang for the first time. If the vehicle rolls, your best window is the road bend by the minuet. 6 seconds before the wedding crowd catches up. She was already calculating it. Angle decrease. Slight downhill. Target in motion. Wind cleaner over the road than the yard, but a truck strike might rupture whatever sat inside those crates. And nobody in the stack was yet willing to gamble what those contents were. Then Nazim did something unexpected. He turned away from the truck and walked toward the wedding compound. Mercer swore under his breath. Lantern, where is he going? The local asset answered a second later, voice strained. Meeting the bride's father, local elder. Sir, if principal enters the family room, he may remain for hours. The mission had just crossed from difficult to dangerous. A social event in that valley was not delay. It was camouflage. If Nazim suspected surveillance, he could wait inside a house layered with civilians until nightfall, then move under darkness with every advantage. Mercer made the call everyone had feared. Beckett, move. Quinn slammed a palm lightly into the dirt in frustration. Elena kept her eye on the glass. Down below, Beckett's element began to reposition through scrub and broken wall lines, a risk to gain a better angle before the target vanished indoors. For 30 seconds, it almost looked possible. Then Elena saw the flash. Not sunlight on glass. Too brief, too deliberate. A signal mirror from the far eastern terrace, one ridge higher than Beckett's movement lane. She shifted magnification and caught the source. A teenage boy, maybe 14, maybe younger, standing beside a half-collapsed stone wall. He lowered the mirror into his sleeve and looked down slope. Break movement, she said instantly. Break, break, break. East Terrace observer. Possible compromise. Beckett's voice snapped back. Negative. No visual. I have visual. Boy with mirror. He just flasher lane. Mercer came on. Security halt. Hold positions. Too late. A burst of automatic fire ripped from a rock fold above Beckett's route. Sharp and ugly in the valley air. Stone chips jumped. One operator dropped hard behind a terrace wall. Another returned, fire uphill. Villagers screamed. The wedding music cut off in the middle of a note. The whole valley convulsed. Contact! 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 Beckett shouted. Upper East Ridge. 2, maybe 3 shooters. Quinn swung the scope. How about muzzle smoke? Distance 850 from Beckett. Elena. She was already searching for a clean support shot and finding none. Fighters on the East Ridge were firing from behind stacked rock with only fragments exposed. Below them, civilians scattered in every direction, turning every background into a no-fire maze. Mercer's command voice hardened into steel. All elements hold fires unless P clear. Lantern, get away from principal if you can. In a village yard, Nazim moved with startling composure. No panic, no confusion. He grabbed the bride's father by the arm and pulled him toward the warehouse side gate, while bodyguards formed a moving shell around them. He knew, Quinn said. Elena felt the truth of it before she could prove it. Or someone warned him. One of Beckett's men shouted over the net. Breath ragged. Sparks hit Ramirez. Superficial. We're pinned by angle. Mercer made a decision. Hide 1. Do not engage principal unless you have absolute isolation. Priority shifts to preserving asset and maintaining target track. The words were clean. The meaning was not. They were about to lose the shot window. Nazim disappeared through the side gate with his bodyguards and a local elder. The blue truck remained in the yard, engine now running. The driver waited, scanning the ridges. Elena tracked every doorway, every rooftop line, every patch of moving shadow. Her pulse was steady. Her thoughts were not. The mirror signal, the ambush timing, the way Nazim had moved before the first burst, as if a script were finally reaching its next page. Quinn spoke low mint only for her. You think the leak is inside the valley or inside the task force? Elena's answer came without hesitation. Both. Before he could respond, Lantern's voice exploded across the net. No longer controlled. No longer careful. They know me. They know me. I'm burned. A gunshot cracked through the transmission, then static. The mountain, the village, the whole operation seemed to tighten around that single sound. Mercer did not raise his voice. Men at his level almost never did when things turned worst. All stations listen. We are now in compromised posture. Security element, fix the East Ridge shooters and prepare emergency exfil. Hide 1. Maintain eyes on the warehouse and truck. If principal moves, I want him called the instant he breathes. Elena settled deeper behind the rifle. The stock welded to her shoulder. Left hand feathering the rear bag. Below, the truck driver looked at his watch. Above, somewhere on the unseen reverse slope, Beckett's team traded fire with an enemy that had prepared the ground better than anyone had known. And in the side gate shadow of the warehouse, a metal door was beginning to open inward. Quinn inhaled sharply over the scope. Movement multiple weight. Elena centered the reticle on the narrowing seam of darkness. A figure stepped out first, wearing Mercer's planned future like a shield. Not a bodyguard, not a worker, but a woman in a pale dress with her hands bound in front of her and a black hood hanging loose around her neck. Push forward so the whole yard could see exactly what Nazim was willing to move under cover of chaos. The driver brought the blue truck closer. Behind a hostage, still hidden in shadow, someone lifted a radio and looked directly toward the ridge where Mercer's command element was supposed to be listening from miles away. Then Quinn said the words that turned every calculation in Elena's head into a countdown. That's not just a transfer, he whispered. That's an extraction package. And from the doorway behind the hostage, Nazim finally stepped into clear view. Nazim finally stepped into clear view. He held the radio low against his thigh, one hand resting on the bound woman's shoulder as if he were presenting cargo rather than a human being. In person, he looked smaller than his file, leaner with the tight economy of movement common to men who had survived by assuming somebody was always watching. His beard was trimmed close. His scarf sat loose at the neck. The old right leg asymmetry Elena had spotted in the simulator was there. Subtle but real. A fractional outward rotation every third step. Not enough for a stranger to notice. Enough for a sniper to know. The woman in the pale dress stumbled once and corrected without help. Quinn inhaled hard behind glass. And look at her hands. Elena shifted focus. The bindings were plastic restraints, not rope, cinched hard enough to whiten the skin around the wrists. There was bruising at the jawline, dirt on the hem, and something else under the torn sleeve. A narrow strip of black hook and loop. Not village clothing, not accidental. Mercer's voice came over the net. Flatter now, quieter. Haidwan described the female mid-30s, Quinn said. Light skin tone, western profile, head shaved or cut short under the hood line, wrist flex tied, bearing doesn't match local civilian. A beat passed. Then Mercer said, all stations listen carefully. New priority, that hostage may be Bluebird. Nobody on the net spoke for half a second because nobody liked hearing about priorities that had not existed 10 seconds earlier. Quinn broke the silence first. Maybe Mercer did not answer the challenge directly. Bluebird is a compartmented intelligence source, believed lost 11 days ago. If that is her, she is knowledge we cannot replace. Elena kept the reticle steady on Nazim's upper chest. You withheld that for mission prep. Yes. Why? Because the fewer people carrying it in their heads, the lower the leak risk. There was no good reply to that. Not because Mercer was right. Because on operations like this, he might have been right yesterday and wrong today, and nobody ever learned which fast enough to feel good about it. Below them, Nazim said something to the hostage and turned her toward the blue truck. She moved like someone fighting pain through training, not panic through instinct. Her chin stayed level. Even at this distance, Elena could read the effort of controlling it. Quinn murmured, she's military or intel. How do you know? She's counting steps. The hostage reached the truck. A bodyguard yanked open the passenger side door. Instead of shoving her into the cab, they positioned her standing on the running board with one arm pinned, using her body to screen his while he surveyed the ridges. The gesture was calculated, a message for anyone watching. He knew he had eyes on him. He was daring those eyes to choose. Mercer heard the shape of it, too. Do not fire. I say again, do not fire. Beckett came over the net through bursts of gunfire from the East Ridge. Sir, if he rolls now, we lose him and the source. And if we shoot through her, we lose more than that, Mercer answered. One of Beckett's men grunted over comms, pain compressed in a breath. Another burst cracked against stone. The wedding crowd had fractured into knots of screaming civilians, goats, overturned trays, and men who did not know whether to run or lie flat. The whole yard had become a nightmare of movement. Elena tracked Nazim's face as he leaned briefly past the hostage's shoulder to look toward the upper ridges. He was not guessing, he was searching. He knew a precision shooter was somewhere above him. He did not know where. The truck driver revved once. Vehicle preparing to move, Quinn said. Mercer answered immediately. Haidwan maintained visual. Security element disengage, if possible, and shift to intercept Route Bravo. Beckett replied with a breathless laugh that held no humor. Route Bravo's gone. East Ridge shooters on the terraces. A heavier weapon opened from the lower slope. Short controlled bursts. Machine gun fire raking the ambush rocks to pin heads down. Beckett's machine gun team. Elena realized he was buying seconds the ugly way. Below the truck rolled forward. Nazim climbed onto the passenger side step behind the hostage rather than entering the cab. One hand locked at her collar. The other kept the radio. He was using her exactly the way Elena had feared he would. Chest and head masked behind living tissue, exposing only slivers of face and shoulder around the steel frame of the door. Any shot from the ridge now would have to pass through a shifting human aperture less than 2 handspans wide. It's deliberate, Quinn said. He knows the angle. Elena had already ranged the vehicle as it crossed the yard. 1612, then 1628, then 1634 as it started up the west road toward the bend above the minuet. The number landed in her body like a key fitting a lock. That bend. Same depression angle. Same line of flight they had marked in darkness. Same narrow section where the road pitched outward and forced the truck to slow before the higher turn. If the hostage dropped or the target leaned at the wrong moment, the door frame would open a lane no wider than a notebook. Elaine, not a certainty, Elaine. Quinn saw her reticle settle farther up the road and understood. You're building for the bend. Yes. At that speed, your time of flight is still near 3 seconds. I know. Wind stacking off the river. I know. Mirage in the middle lane is breaking left. I know. He stopped speaking because that was what a good spotter did when the shooter was already ahead of him. The truck climbed. Mercer was listening to the silence from the hide and hearing too much in it. Captain report. Eliminating future shot lines. Elena said, that is not what you're doing. No, sir. The truck passed the mine rate ladder, engine laboring in second gear. Dust lifted in a pale ribbon behind it. The hostage tried once to twist her head, perhaps to look up the ridge, perhaps to pull air through an easier angle, but Nazim jerked her back hard enough that even Quinn hissed at the cruelty of it. Mercer's voice arrived again. Harder now. Captain Serrano, if you're considering a shot through that screen, dismiss it. Elena watched the road. Not the target. Negative. At that distance. Yes, sir. With a live hostage on the frame. Yes, sir. Mercer let out one short, incredulous breath. Impossible. There was again the word he kept using for difficult things when emotion got into his judgment before he could stop it. Elena said, no, sir. Expensive. The truck hit the first washout and bounced. The hostage bent at the knees to stay upright. Nazim adjusted his grip. Not enough. Not yet. Quinn lowered his voice until it was barely sound at all. Range 1634. 10-degree re downhill. Wind near muzzle 7 left to right. Mid-lane fading. Target lane opening 18 inches. If he checks the curve. Hull point 3 low. Spin drift accounted. Elena inhaled. Let half of it go and built the whole problem out of numbers and behavior. 338 normal long flight, enough retained energy if the angle stayed clean. Glass temperature stable barrel, still cold enough to behave honestly. Road camber would force the driver to correct left. Nazim standing on the step would reflexively lean out to see around the hostage as the truck nosed through the turn. The hostage's bound hands were not passive. She had been working the restraints. Elena could see it now in the unnatural tension of her forearms. She was waiting too. Not helpless, Elena thought. Timing below. Beckett came across the net. His voice torn by effort and gunfire. Hide 1. East Ridge is shifting. You have maybe 15 seconds before they climb enough to see your muzzle signature. 15 seconds. Quinn's finger touched the back of her shoulder once. Nothing more. No pressure, no demand. The truck entered the bend. Nazim leaned. The hostage dropped. Elena broke the trigger. The suppressor turned a rifle that should have shattered the hillside into a hard metallic cough. Recoil drove straight back in a bone and pack and stone. The reticle climbed, settled, and through the optic she saw the side mirror explode outward in bright shards. A dark flower opened behind it. Nazim's head snapped back, struck the truck frame, and vanished downward as his body collapsed against the door. For one impossible half-second, the hostage remained upright on the running board, staring ahead as if the shot had removed the world around her rather than the man behind her. Then she kicked backward hard and threw herself clear. The truck swerved. Impact, Quinn said, but he didn't need to. Everybody on a net had heard the shot and then heard nothing from Mercer at all. The driver lost the curve. The blue truck clipped the road shoulder, crashed through a low stone wall, and slewed sideways into a drainage ditch with a rear axle hanging over open slope. Bodyguards ran in confusion, firing uphill toward empty rock. One fell trying to drag Nazim's body. The hostage rolled down the inside bank, disappeared behind the front wheel, and stayed there. Mercer found his voice at last. Who authorized that shot? No one answered because the valley had exploded again. The East Ridge shooters, realizing the principal was down, shifted fire wildly across multiple elevations. Muzzle flashes blinked through rock folds. Beckett's machine gun hammered back. Tracers cut orange scars through the dust. Villagers screamed from the terraces below. The truck's engine wed at high idle. One wheel spinning uselessly in the ditch. Quinn swung the scope. Source alive. Front wheel well. Driver side. One bodyguard moving to recover. Elena was already back on target, but the lane was dirty now. The bodyguard kept darting through dust and metal too close to the hostage. Security element. Mercer snapped. All effort to the truck. QRF rerouted. Hide 1. Suppress if clean. Beckett answered immediately, moving. For a moment, Elena thought he meant from the lower ridge to the truck, which would have been suicide. Then she saw it through the glass. Beckett and one other operator had broken from cover and were sprinting along a terrace cut that ran beneath the east ambush shooters' line, using collapsed walls as stagger concealment. It was reckless. It was also the only route that might reach the road before the surviving guards were formed. One of the east ridge guns shifted and found them. The shooter exposed just enough shoulder and barrel behind a slab of rock to create a problem Elena could solve. Got one, she said. Send it, Quinn replied. This shot was shorter, cleaner, and still viciously technical because of the angle. 790 from the hide to the rock seam. Crosswind less relevant. Exposure half a second. She fired. The enemy rifle vanished from a gap. No drama, just absence. Beckett's team kept moving. The hostage pushed herself from the wheel well and crawled toward the ditch wall. One bodyguard saw her, turned, and raised his weapon. Elena tried to build a lane and lost it in the same second to dust and vehicle frame. Then a sharp crack came from below, and the bodyguard folded sideways. Beckett's side angle about 300 m and closing. Truck secure left side, he shouted, breath burning through the mic. One Kia, one driver still in cab. Careful of the cargo, Mercer said. No room for careful. Beckett lunged the last few meters, slid into the ditch beside the hostage, and yanked her behind the engine block as the driver inside the truck brought up a pistol through the shattered windshield. Beckett's teammate fired twice into the cab. The pistol dropped. Steam hissed from the ruined radiator. For 3 seconds, the whole scene looked stable. Then Quinn swore so softly, Elena almost missed it. Rear bed. Rear bed. A bodyguard she had lost in the initial chaos rose behind the stack crates with a handset in one hand and a dead man's switch-style plunger in the other. His face was gray with dust and rage. He was not trying to escape. He was trying to erase evidence. Detonator Quinn said. Too close to Beckett, too close to the hostage, too close to the cargo. They still did not fully understand. Elena tracked, but the bodyguard's torso was masked by the crate stack. The only visible lane was the forearm holding the switch and a sliver of neck under the jaw. Hard shot, dangerous shot, but letting him close the circuit was worse. Before she could fire, Beckett looked up, saw the same problem, and made the kind of decision that divided careers. He let go of the hostage and climbed onto the truck side rail. Beckett, no. Mercer barked. Beckett moved anyway. The bodyguard punched the plunger. Nothing happened. A false trigger, a bluff, or a damaged circuit. That half second of surprise let Beckett slam into him chest to chest. Both men disappeared over the far side of the truck bed in a tangle of limbs, weapon slings, and dust. Gunfire erupted at ground level. 2 shots, so close together they sounded like one. Then silence from that side. Quinn hunted the angle and found it. Beckett's up, he said. Bodyguard down. Beckett hit. Mercer did not waste breath. All elements collapse on truck. East Ridge shooters are breaking contact. Helicopters. 7 minutes out. 7 minutes in a clean field was manageable. 7 minutes in a half-compromised valley with a wounded operator, a living source, possible chemical cargo, and civilians still trapped between firefights was another equation entirely. Elena kept scanning the upper ridge. The ambushers were pulling back exactly as disciplined local fighters would when their purpose had failed. Not to win the fight, to disrupt the mission long enough for the principal to escape. Except the principal had not escaped. Elena had ended that. And yet one question still scraped at her. Who had given them Beckett's movement lane? She watched the eastern terrace again and found the teenage signaler flat behind the same broken wall, staring at the truck below with hands over his head. Not a fighter, just a scare boy used as a relay. The real leak had moved through adults and radios. Quinn caught her searching elsewhere. What is it? The ambush was timed to Beckett's shift, not the original infill. Mercer heard that. Now is not the moment. It is exactly the moment, Elena said. Only Arnett knew he was moving. No one answered for 2 full seconds. Then Creed's voice entered the command channel from the rear command post miles away. He had been silent during the contact, listening, letting field leaders work. When he spoke, people listened. She's right, he said. We just lit up a relay anomaly from the regional fusion cell. Somebody rebroadcast your route update on host nation liaison traffic. Colonel Mercer said one word, confirm. Confirm enough. Same minute, Beckett moved, Nazim's village got a call. The air seemed to change around the net. No one had sold him out in the hide. No knife in the back from the team. Something more ordinary and more infuriating. A compromised partner network. One Mercer had trusted because the mission clock had demanded speed. Beckett coughed into the mic, voice weaker now, but still annoyingly dry. So I nearly got ventilated by bureaucracy. No one laughed, but the line held. Mercer's response came clipped and iron flat. And for the first time, Elena heard not command certainty, but anger directed inward. That relay authorization was mine. Creed answered him without softness. Then own it after you get them home. The helicopters announced themselves first as a vibration in rock, then as a distant chopping in the high air. Below, Beckett and his teammate had pulled the hostage clear of the truck and were applying a field dressing to Beckett's left side. Dark blood spread through his jacket under the plate carrier. Not arterial. Bad enough. Mercer ordered the truck, searched in place. Quinn watched through the scope as operators cut open the first crate and recoiled. Not bulk explosives, he said. Detonator trees, shaping liners, printed circuitry. Enough for a lot of small devices. Embassy package. Elena asked. Or 10 softer targets instead of one hard one. Worse in some ways, harder to stop. The hostage finally got the hood off fully and pushed herself upright on unsteady knees. Through the spotting scope, her face came into focus. Sharp cheekbones, cracked lower lip, eyes alert despite exhaustion. She said something to Beckett, pointed once toward Nazim's body, then toward the truck bed. Mercer was already calling to the recovery team. Check the body for media, everything. He moved with a radio on purpose. A medic reached the truck. Another operator dragged the dead target clear. Nazim's scarf had fallen away. Blood darkened the metal door where he had struck and slid. The shot had entered exactly where Elena had intended, crossing the lane behind the hostage's shoulder and ending everything in less time than Mercer had used to call impossible. Quinn exhaled slowly, finally allowing the aftermath into his body. He leaned because he thought the hostage made him invulnerable. Elena stayed in the gun. Most dangerous men mistake a shield for control. A flash bloomed high on the ridge to their left. Quinn shouted, "Counter sniper." The round hit the rock lip of the hide and sprayed limestone shards into their faces. Elena felt something hot cut across her cheek. Quinn jerked back with a grunt. Spotting scope knocked sideways. Second shooter delayed patient. He had waited for the helicopters for the shot for the relax that follows success. Professional enough to know that is when people die. Elena dragged Quinn lower by his vest and got the rifle back up onto the camouflage sheet. Her cheek stung. Blood ran warm along her jaw and cooled fast in the mountain air. "You hit?" she asked, grazed. "You're maybe." "I'm fine." He was not fine, but he was functioning. The counter-sniper had picked a devilish angle on the reverse shoulder, almost level with him, using backlit stone and a crevice barely wider than a rifle for concealment. Elena found only glints of probability, not a target. Another round punched through the hide fabric and thudded it into the pack behind them. "He's walking us," Quinn said. Mercer heard the strain in their breathing. Hide one report. Counter sniper left shoulder near level elevation. Elena said, "We are pinned. Can you break contact?" Not without standing into his lane. Below them, the first helicopter rolled over the ridgeline. a black silhouette against widening sky, too early for comfort. Rotor wash would pull dust and brush in all directions, exposing anyone not already masked. Beckett came over the net, pain thick in his voice. I could see your shoulder line from the truck. Give me a reference. Quinn had blood on the side of his neck now, thin and bright. He ignored it and rebuilt the scope one-handed from truck nose. Look up slope to split boulder shaped like AV. Shooter is 2M, right in shadow seam. Got the boulder, Beckett said. You don't have the seam, Elena said. Too much glare. Then give me something useful, Captain. She watched the counter-sniper's lane and understood that Beckett was right. From below, he had a different problem and possibly the only flank angle that mattered. She shifted the optic to a patch of dark scrub just beneath the crevice. See the burned juniper under the seam. Stand by. A breath. Yes. Shooter is half-meter above and left. He's firing through a split no wider than a hand. That's the whole war. Beckett took 3 seconds. No more. His shot came from the ditch below. A flat crack carried up the road. The counter-sniper did not disappear dramatically. He simply ceased to own the crevice. No third round came. Quinn sagged once against the rock and then straightened again. I owe him a bottle. You owe him not saying that out loud. Below, the helicopters settled one by one in staggering clouds of pale dust that rolled through the terrace lanes and over the wrecked truck. Recovery teams moved fast, disciplined and brutal inefficiency. Cargo transferred, source loaded. Beckett loaded after arguing long enough to prove consciousness. Civilians were pushed clear as gently as urgency allowed. Nazim's body went into a black transit bag with none of the importance he had spent years building around himself. Mercer's final order in the valley was simple. Burn nothing you don't need to burn. We came for precision. Leave precision behind. Then they were moving. Extraction from high ground is always uglier than insertion because gravity stops feeling like healthy, instant exhaustion arrives. Elena and Quinn broke the hide in under 90 seconds, stripping only what mattered, leaving brush and broken cloth where they lay. Packed back on, rifle slung, knees screaming on the descent. The helicopter's rotor wash hit them halfway down the slope. Hot diesel breath and airborne grit flattening scrub and stinging every exposed patch of skin. At the casualty, Bird Beckett was on the deck, pale under the blood and dust, one hand still locked around his rifle sling until a medic pried it loose finger by finger. The hostage sat strapped to the bulkhead opposite him with a blanket over her shoulders and an oxygen line under her nose. She looked up as Elena climbed aboard. At close distance, she appeared even less like a victim and more like someone who had been operating past safe limits for days. Her head had indeed been cut short, likely to alter appearance. A purple bruise ran from temple to cheekbone, but her eyes were intact, clear measuring. You were on the ridge, she said. Her voice was rough but precise. Elena nodded. The woman looked at the blood on Elena's cheek, then at Quinn's ear wrapped in gauze, then finally at Beckett on the deck. How many did that take? Enough, Elena said. The woman gave the smallest nod, understanding the answer for what it was. Mara Sloan. So Bluebird had a name after all. Captain Elena Serrano. Sloan's gaze held on her a moment longer. He thought the angle made him safe. Elena secured her rifle and sat across for Beckett. He wasn't the first. The helicopter lifted. The valley dropped away beneath them in fragments of dust, broken walls, and dawn light catching the river. For the first time since insertion, Elena let her back touch metal and felt how deep the fatigue had gone. Adrenaline drained out of her limbs in stages, leaving tremor behind. Her trigger finger ached. Her left forearm buzzed with overuse. Quinn closed his eyes against the bulkhead and finally looked his age. Mercer was on the same bird, seated near the ramp, headset hanging loose around his neck. He had the black transit bag containing the Zay, recovered effects at his boots, and the expression of a man already in the debrief and not liking what he expected to hear. Halfway back to base, Sloan spoke again. There's a second route, she said. Mercer's head came up. What? She swallowed, took air through the line, and forced the words out in order. The components in the truck are not the main package. Nazim split the network. Smaller cells, same initiators, different couriers. He wanted the embassy threat to pull attention while the rail series moved through clinics and bus terminals. The helicopter's engine noise seemed to recede around the sentence. How many locations? Mercer asked. 5, I know, maybe 7. He kept them compartmented. She looked at him directly now. There's a drive in the scarf seam. Not on the body, in the scarf. Mercer's eyes flicked once to the transit bag. Why didn't he kill you sooner? Because I built part of his concealment protocol before I turned him into a source. She said he wanted me alive until he was across the border. Quinn opened one eye. That's a professional disagreement. A faint, tired smile touched Sloane's split lip and vanished. By the time they landed at Red Basin, the mission had already expanded again. Texts seized the scarf. Analysts flooded the operations floor. Medics moved Beckett to surgery and Quinn to a treatment room for the ear and neck. Elena got her cheek cleaned, 2 steer strips, and a fresh uniform shirt because the old one had dried stiff with dust and blood. No one let her sleep. Debrief began under fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly unreal. The room smelled of coffee, antiseptic, warm electronics, and a sour undertone of exhausted gear. Monitors displayed drone footage, stills from helmet cameras, Mapcom spikes, and a frame-by-frame replay of the shot at the road band. Somebody had already measured it twice. 1,634 m, 18 in effective aperture. Moving vehicle, live hostage, single round. Elena sat at the long table with a paper cup of untouched coffee and listened as analysts walked the aftermath into language. The compromised relay at the regional fusion cell had indeed passed Mercer's route update through a host nation officer already in Nazim's pocket. The village elder hosting the wedding had coordinated the mirror signal with the ambush team. Lantern had been exposed by that same chain. Beckett's movement had not been betrayed by arrogance or carelessness. It had been sold by bureaucracy and a compromised partner network, moving faster than verification. Mercer took that without flinching. When the intelligence officer finished, Creed leaned back in his chair and looked at Mercer. Anything you want added for context? Mercer remained standing at the head of the room, one hand on the table, the other holding the after-action packet he had not yet opened. He looked tired in a way rank usually tries to conceal. Yes, he said. The room stilled. I authorized a liaison relay that exposed a shift. That decision is mine. Included. Nobody wrote immediately because blame stated that plainly in a room like that had its own gravity. Mercer continued. Also include that Captain Serrano withheld fire twice under lawful doubt, maintained target track through compromise, and terminated principal with 1 round when no other clean option existed. He set the packet down. Record the geometry exactly. Do not simplify it because it sounds improbable. Creed's eye stayed on him. Improbable. Mercer looked across the table at Elena for the first time since the flight back. I used the wrong word, he said. The room stayed silent because everyone understood what had caused him to say that in front of witnesses. Elena answered with the same restraint. Yes, sir. Beckett was still in recovery when the second half of the mission began. Using the day to drive from the scarf seam and Sloane's interrogation of memory, follow-on teams hit 3 transit caches before nightfall and a 4th before dawn. The 5th turned into a 6-hour chase across 2 districts and ended with bomb-making components stacked in a clinic basement behind pediatric supplies. By then, the original Valley shot had already become rumor in secure channels. Rumor was how units metabolized shock. Facts came later. Elena slept for 91 minutes on a cot in the side office before Quinn woke her by setting a folder on her chest. You snore like suppressed fire, he said. She opened one eye. That metaphor needs work. Probably here inside the folder was the formal transcript of the road-bin shot solution reconstructed from telemetry, weather logs and scope video, muzzle velocity, angle, wind bracket, estimated target speed, aperture width, point of impact. At the bottom, someone had typed a dry line of analysis that made Quinn snort. Shooter assessed acceptable confidence under dynamic constraints. Elena sat up. Acceptable confidence. Bureaucratic poetry. She closed the folder and rubbed the bridge of her nose. How's Beckett still alive? Deep through and through. very irritated with all available personnel. Good sign. Quinn nodded toward the hallway. Mercer wants to see you. She found him alone on the observation deck, overlooking the Dawn Range. Outside, the desert was turning from blue-black to pale gold. The targets downrange, still ghostly in first light. Wind pushed low dust across the access road in thin ribbons. The same range where he had tried to send her away now looked almost ceremonial. Mercer held no tablet, no folder, no visible shield except posture. "Captain, sir." For several seconds, he said nothing. Below them, a range crew vehicle rolled between BMS, headlights still on in the dim. Somewhere nearby, a coffee maker clicked. "You saved Sloan," Mercer said. "We all did. You know what I mean." Elena let the silence stand. It was one of the few ways to force men like him to continue. Honestly, he did. "I had operators in Fallujah, Helmand, and Romani." He said, "Good men, fast men. The ones who survived longest usually erred on action. I built a career teaching that. Move first. Decide under momentum. Do not freeze." He looked out over the range rather than at her. "Then eventually you hold enough memorial letters in your hands, and certainty starts feeling cleaner than judgment. Cleaner, simpler, easier to command. Yesterday, you proved those are not the same thing." He reached into his pocket and set something on the railing between them. A challenge coin. One side carried the insignia of his old Special Warfare Unit. The other the seal of the Joint Command worn edges, not ceremonial issue one he had carried. Elena looked at it, but did not touch it. "Sir, I'm not giving you a souvenir." Mercer said, "I'm telling you I was wrong in a way that nearly mattered too much." That was apology in his language. Elena picked up the coin. It was warm from his hand. Heavy. "You were wrong twice," she said. Mercer's eyebrow moved a fraction. "Only twice. About impossible and about what hesitation is." He considered that, then gave a short exhale that might have been the beginning of a laugh on a less tired day. "You think slower is always better?" "No, sir. I think slower at the right moment is what keeps speed from becoming panic." The range below brightened by another degree. Steel plates came into clear view. The world looked newly machined. Mercer nodded once. "Creed wants you on the advanced long-range cadre for the next cycle. Instructions, standards, revision, live problem sets. Is it a request or a sentence? That depends on how much you enjoy teaching people why they're wrong." She rolled the coin once across her knuckles and closed her hand around it. "I can learn to enjoy it." He turned to go, then stopped. "For the record, Captain." "Yes, sir. When I asked to authorize that shot, it was not accusation." She studied him. "What was it?" Mercer looked out at the far berm where the smallest white plate in the complex had just caught the first direct sun. "It was disbelief," he said, and relief. He left her there with the desert opening into morning. Beckett was awake by afternoon and angry enough to reassure everyone. Elena found him in the medical ward, propped up against pillows, color bad but eyes sharp. His left side was wrapped thick. A monitor ticked steadily near the bed. He looked at her entry, then at the bandage on her cheek. "You look better than I hoped," he said. "You sound worse." "Probably accurate." She pulled a chair over and sat. For a man who had spent 2 days trying not to lose status, he seemed oddly calm now, as if pain had cauterized whatever vanity remained exposed. "I heard about the relay leak," he said. It cleared her name. Beckett stared at the blanket for a moment. "I know." She waited. His jaw worked once. "I also heard the reconstruction on your shot. That was fast. Nothing moves faster in a task force than somebody else's miracle." He turned his head enough to meet her eyes. "I was wrong about you." Elena could have let him say only that. Could have taken a victory clean. Instead, she said, "You still moved on the truck." "I moved because there was no other choice. That's usually when it matters." A thin smile appeared and disappeared. "You trying to make me a better person while I'm medicated?" "No, just accurate." He shifted carefully, pain flashing across his face, and then gone behind professionalism. "The bodyguard on the plunger. I saw him late because I was looking where I expected the threat to be, not where it actually was." He breathed in shallowly. "You ever get tired of learning the same lesson with different consequences?" "Yes." "Good. Thought it was just me." When she stood to leave, he stopped her with one more sentence. That shot at the band, he said. I wouldn't have taken it. Elena looked back. I know. Not because I couldn't calculate it. I know. He nodded once toward the door, surrendering the point with more dignity than she expected. Then go teach the next batch, whatever it is. You know that math does it. 2 weeks later, the follow-on arrests were still rolling up. The embassy threat tree had been cut before fruing, and Red Basin had resumed its usual rhythm of training, maintenance, and the quiet administrative violence with which institutions turned blood and improvisation into doctrine. The report on the Valley operation was classified at a level high enough to make most of the details disappear into vaults and need-to-know compartments. The shot, however, would survive, not as legend at first, as a standard revision. Creed insisted on that. Training lanes were rewritten to include hostage-screened moving targets, behavior discrimination under pattern disruption, and a new evaluation note in bold type. Lawful patience is not hesitation. Some of the old guard resisted the wording. Mercer overruled them personally. Elena took the cadre assignment and discovered that teaching expert shooters was a different kind of combat. Younger operators wanted formulas. Older ones wanted a confirmation that their formulas already worked. Both were dangerous. She gave them neither. She gave them hard warnings, awkward wind, uncertain backstops, and debriefs that cut deeper than praise ever could. Don't shoot the rifle, she told a Marine gunny on day 3 after he missed a partially screened steel silhouette at 1400. Solve the person, then solve the round. He frowned behind eye pro. That sounds philosophical. It's not. It's geometry with consequences. Quinn assisted when he was not on rotation. Ear mostly healed, sarcasm fully restored. He hung his daughter's painted vane above the instruction board when they ran mountain wind blocks. Nobody touched it without permission. Everybody eventually asked about it. Sloan returned once before disappearing back into a world Elena did not belong to. She came in plain clothes, hair growing out, a thin scar now visible at the wrist where the restraints had cut. They met on the long-range deck at sunset while the range shimmered orange and black. You knew I was going to drop, Sloan said without preamble. I knew you were trying to. You waited. Yes. Sloan looked downrange for a long time. Most people call waiting passive. Most people have never had a life depend on timing. Sloan gave a small nod. Mercer told me about Nineveh. The name moved through Elena like cold water. Not pain exactly. Not anymore. More like a place in the body where weather could still get in. He shouldn't have. Elena said he told me because he thinks your record begins there. It doesn't. Sloan turned toward her. What happened in that market is part of you. It is not the limit of you. When she left, she said something on the bench beside Elena. A patch, not military. A plain black square with a tiny embroidered bluebird in one corner. No unit markings, no explanation. Elena kept it anyway. Months later, on a morning as cold and exact as the one when Mercer had tried to send her home, a new class assembled on the firing line at Red Basin. Men and women from different services, different schools, same carefully hidden fear of being ordinary under pressure. The smallest white plate on the far berm shone in clean desert sun. Wind moved left to right, then softened, then came back again. Elena walked the line, checking bolt position, stock length, rear bag pressure, breathing patterns. She did not raise her voice. She never needed to. The students listened because ranges have a way of sorting substance from performance before lunch. At the far end of the line, a young lieutenant looked up from his rifle and asked the question all of them eventually asked in one form or another. How long do you hold before you break the shot? Elena looked past him to the mirage crawling over the heatless morning ground, to the steel waiting far out where small errors became permanent, to the exact space between impulse and action where people either repeated history or changed it. Then she answered, long enough to be certain, she said. Sure enough to matter. The lieutenant nodded as if that solved everything. It solved almost nothing, but it gave him the right direction, and sometimes that was the most honest thing one professional could hand another. He settled behind the rifle. On the observation deck above, Mercer stood with Creed and Quinn, saying nothing, watching a line. The painted wind vane hung motionless for 1 second, then turned, then steadied. Elena saw it from the corner of her eye and thought of a mountain valley. A dead spotter who had taught her patience. A rival who had learned humility under fire. A colonel who had finally understood the cost of the word impossible. And a shot that had mattered because it had not been taken too soon. "Sun ready," Quinn called. The range went still. The young lieutenant exhaled, held, and broke the trigger. Far downrange, steel rang bright and clean through the morning air. No one laughed. After the line went cold, the student stayed prone a second longer than necessary, listening to the echo fade off the BMS as if the steel might explain what skill actually sounded like when it was honest. Elena let them have the silence. Instructors who filled every gap with advice usually did it to calm themselves. The desert did not care about their need for noise. Wind slid across the range in a thin, dry sheet, carrying dust, burnt powder, and a faint mineral smell that rose after a cold night surrendered to heat. Downrange, the target rocked once more on its chains and settled. Training always looked cleaner than combat. The body remembered otherwise. Creed walked the firing line with a clipboard he never seemed to read, stopping behind each shooter just long enough to unsettle bad habits. Mercer remained on the deck above, hands clasped behind his back, saying nothing. His presence now a different kind of pressure than it had been before the valley. Nobody mistook silence for softness. They simply understood that standards had shifted and were less interested in pride than in truth. Quinn moved between mats with the same patient economy he brought to hides, correcting a rear bag here, a shoulder pocket there, tapping one scope turret with a knuckle when a student trusted dial data more than the world in front of him. When the relay ended, Elena called the shooters off their guns and made them stand facing the targets they had missed. Some looked irritated, some looked embarrassed. One staff sergeant from Force Recon looked angry in the way competent people often do when evidence refuses to support self-image. Elena waited until the discomfort matured into attention. "You are not here to prove that you can hit steel," she said. "You are here to learn when steel lies to you. Paper does not move. Pop-up silhouettes do not breathe. Real people hide inside patterns behind glass, beside families under weather. Inside your assumptions. If you only train for certainty, uncertainty will bury you." No one answered. They did not need to. The youngest among them had that particular expression of professionals, discovering that mastery was farther away than they had hoped. Elena saw herself in some of them and disliked the recognition. After Nineveh, she had spent months believing technique could repair grief if she sharpened it enough. More data, more reps, smaller groups, longer holds, faster corrections. None of it changed the weight of one withheld round or the absence left by the man who had taught her to distrust perfect solutions. What changed her was harder to measure. Learning that judgment was not the enemy of violence. Learning that patience had teeth. Learning that sometimes the cleanest shot in the world was the one you refused. Later that afternoon, she found herself alone in the small equipment room behind a range office, rewrapping a sling she did not need to rewrap. When Mercer stepped in and closed the door halfway behind him. Outside, trucks moved, radios chattered, boots crossed concrete. Inside, the room smelled of nylon, oil, cardboard, and sunbaked dust. He held a thin folder in one hand. "Promotion board reviewed your file," he said. "There is language in it. I am removing." Elena looked up from the slang. "Language, sir. Caution under dynamic engagement," he said. "It was written years ago by people who valued the wrong evidence. It will not survive another day." She set the sling down carefully. That kind of record tends to outlive context. Mercer nodded once. "Only if leaders let it." He handed her the folder. Inside was a printed recommendation from Major, revised, signed, and routed with Mercer's endorsement attached in a hand that looked carved rather than written. Elena read the final line twice. "Candidate demonstrates disciplined lethality, command reliability, and exceptional target discrimination under extreme constraint." She closed the file. "Why now?" she asked. Mercer answered without hesitation. "Because institutions remember errors faster than growth, and because I helped feed the wrong memory." The fluorescent light hummed above them. Neither of them tried to make the moment warmer than it was. That evening, after the range emptied and the mountains turned violet at their edges, Elena walked alone beyond the last BM to the maintenance road, where the desert opened flat and enormous under the falling sun. She carried no rifle, only the challenge coin in one pocket and a blue bird patch in the other. The wind had lost its heat. It moved around her wrists and collar like cool water. In the distance, she could hear a generator, then a coyote, then nothing at all. She thought of Daniel Vale there. Not in the manner grief first arrives, sharp and selfish, but in the steadier way it remains once time has sanded the worst corners off. He would have mocked the ceremonial quality of the moment. He would have approved anyway. She stopped at the old concrete marker near the fence line and pressed the coin in her palm until the edges printed against skin. In another life, she might have believed recognition healed things. It did not. It clarified them. The valley shot had not erased Nineveh. Beckett's respect had not replaced the dead. Mercer's apology had not untied the cost that came with command. But something had changed that was just as real. The story attached to her name was no longer written by the worst day she had survived. It had been rewritten by what she chose under pressure when every easy answer pointed the wrong way. That finally felt less like redemption than truth. When she turned back toward Red Basin, stars were appearing over the range, patient above steel, gravel, and all the careful human effort below. Tomorrow she would teach again. Someone would miss, someone would learn, someone would carry one sentence from this place into a future moment where a life balanced on judgment. That was enough for her.